Hello, everybody. Bo Prosser, Center for Christian Education, C4CE.org. We got a new website coming and we got a new URL. Please take note of that. And BoProsser.com still works, but C4CE.org. I hope you'll start to remember that and think on that. We are back. My buddy Ruben Swint. Ruben, how you doing today?
I'm having a great day, Bo.
Hey, thanks for joining in. We are doing another quarter's worth of year-round stewardship. And so we are looking today at July, August, September, quarter three, and some good things for us as we find ourselves in the middle of the summer, headed towards the fall. Uh, Good ideas, even in the summertime. You are suggesting that there are things we can be doing around stewardship and generosity. Are Don't you know we take the summer off, Ruben?
Well, we used to could before we had the internet and Zoom, but now we got to work year round.
Absolutely. No rest for the weary.
That's
So
right.
let's jump into it. July, which is down month for most of us, you are suggesting that there are some specific strategic actions for stewardship and generosity. So walk us through July and tell us some things you think we might ought to be about.
Well, I'm glad to, and you jump in when you like. So far, the first 6 months, we've been talking about strategies for asking, hoping to receive. But there's a critical piece that we haven't addressed yet, and I think July is a good time to start doing this, and that's the thank you. If people respond to the ask, we need to give them the reward of being appreciated, of feeling like, yes, you have indeed responded and you have kept our ministry funding strong. We cannot, number one, overlook the thank you, and we should never underestimate the power of thanking because this is a way that we reinforce behavior and people understand that we get a lot of good done when everybody pitches in at the level of support, both financial and with energy and skills that they have. It's a tremendously important process. So, if you haven't thanked yet during the year, July is a great time to do that. And some churches organize a phone-a-thon. Now, they realize people are on vacation, they're in and out, but it's not an unreasonable thing to think about doing. It's just to make a quick phone call and contact and say, thank you for being a part of our church. Thank you for the many ways you probably support. Now, this is not to call up and say, thank you for giving $17.10 every week for the last 26 weeks. No, that's not the kind of thank you, but it's to say, we just really appreciate your participation and the fact that you're with us. Very important words, with us together in our lives as we seek to be Christians and we seek to be all of the other roles that life is calling us to participate in. So, if you can't reach people by phone and you have an email, shoot them an email. If you like it, handwritten notes are still very valuable tools. Very few people, younger folks, can write cursive. They can print if you got them together. Uh, in fact, I think a nice youth activity may be for the youth to write by hand some notes and address them on the envelope and just at the bottom say, sent to you by a member of the youth ministry. I
Oh,
think that'd
that's a
be a
great idea.
great thing to do.
Absolutely. So after we've said thank you, maybe some internal things we need to be doing, looking at where we've been, how we're doing since the start of the year. Are we doing what we said we were going to be doing? And how are we moving towards those goals? Are we achieving what we thought we were going to?
That's right. That's right. Goals are only important if you measure them. If you track the actions you take to see, number one, were you active? Did you get things done? And this would hark back to January or February when your team was put together and you adopted some goals for the year. And then to the degree you can measure, where are we in terms of goals? Are we at our giving to date point that we wanted to be at? Let me jump down post hole a little bit here. A lot of churches think that the best way to track giving is to take the annual budget and divide it by 12 and then measure giving towards 1/12 of the budget every month. That's a good logical way to do it. And it certainly is easy to communicate. It may not be the most effective thing to do because many churches get 20 to 25% of their annual gifts in December alone.
Right.
So that means you got 11 months of we're behind. We're not doing good. We're not measuring up. And then, hallelujah, in December, the Lord has come and blessed us again. I think you can set yourself up a little better. I think you can look at your giving pattern for the last 3 years and get an average of what percent of annual receipts come in each month. And then measure your monthly giving against your pattern, your historical pattern. That will probably give you anywhere from 2 to 4 months where you can say, hey, we're right on the target, or we're ahead of pace, because that's the way our congregation gives. So measure your goals. You may have had a goal of more participation in terms of volunteerism in your congregation. How's that going? You may have had a goal of teaching a spiritual gifts inventory and getting people to be aware of what their skill level and spiritual gift is and where they can plug in. But this is a nice time of the year to just drop back. How are we doing?
Okay.
Where have we succeeded? Where do we need to give a little more time and energy?
Okay. So I'm going to brand July as relationship month.
Ooh, I like that.
That we're working on relationships
I'm
in
going to
July.
write that down.
First and foremost, with our congregation, we're deepening relationships, saying thank you. Secondly, relationships with our goals. Are we doing what we said we were going to be doing? Thirdly, relationships with the person who is helping us manage our money. Uh, for many of us, if we have endowments and other investments, we're probably using an outside stockbroker or money
Yeah.
manager to help us with that. So, another relationship that we need to visit or renew or maybe start for the first time is with that money manager. What does that look like?
Well, if you're going to encourage your congregation to give from all of their resources, for some of your congregation, that's going to mean from their asset base, which often is invested in the stock market. Not completely or 100%, but some significant percent of large asset bases own stocks, so to speak. So when an individual realizes that there may be a tax advantage to giving stock, especially appreciated stock, in lieu of cash, then how is that going to happen? Are they going to ask their broker to issue them stock certificates? Are they going to put those stock certificates in a FedEx package and insure it and send it to the church? And, what kind of steps are involved? The simplest thing to do is for the donor's broker to transfer stock to the church's broker
Yep.
from account to account. And that happens great when the church has an active relationship with a qualified stockbroker who can take those transfers and, based on the church's instructions, deposit then into the church's account, either as stock to be held or to be sold and turned into cash, waiting a distribution to the church upon the church's instructions. So I think it's vitally important every congregation or nonprofit have an active, renewable relationship with a qualified broker.
Great, great. So then you are suggesting some kind of study, either in the church, in the finance committee, or just among the staff on stewardship and generosity. Uh, what does that entail? What does that look like for you?
Uh, a lot of church initiatives, no matter where they are targeting or focusing, they're going to depend on leaders. In fact, a church rarely performs better than its leadership core. So I think it's critically important if you're getting on the generosity bandwagon and if you want to make some strategic initiatives through the year, like you and I, Bo, are talking about. I think leaders need to be informed, educated, trained, skilled in how to talk about generosity and how to practice generosity. So for me, July, since it's somewhat of a down month in terms of church-wide promotion, it's an excellent opportunity to start with clergy and staff to do a study, do their own critique of the study on stewardship or generosity or both, move that then to the council or the deacons or the governing body, however it's organized in a congregation, as well as those who are responsible for spending and receiving members' financial gifts, and start top down and work your way through the layers of leadership to start to have a common understanding of what is stewardship like in a local church. How is generosity practiced in our everyday lives? How do we respond to the Spirit calling us to do something out of the ordinary that we've never done before, but we're not sure about it? Let's at least be cautiously curious to tip our toe in the water called generosity and see how that is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So uh, that moves us then into August, and I'm naming August Relationship Month. I'm going
Okay.
to say that August is Relationship Month. Now, in July, we had Relationship Month. So we're going to shift our emphasis in August now to relationships. Uh, Maybe in July, we were inward with our relationships. In August, you are suggesting we move outward with our relationships, uh, tying in with some community organizations, back to school backpacks and school supplies to a neighboring elementary or middle school, finding ways to build relationships and share generosity within our community. Walk us through that just for a bit.
Yes, and I love your paradigm of generosity or relationships inward, relationships outward. That's excellent. Um, I will tell you that I was a member of church, my wife and I were, years ago in the Atlanta area, and our church location was near a major, well, it's near I-85, major 8-lane highway. I mean, it was a booger, as they say
Yes.
in the South. Uh, we did everything we could in getting to church to avoid I-85. But within 2 miles of our location was an elementary school that came from a different demographic in terms of their community. They were 2 miles, they were close. But this 8-lane highway just presented it kind of a psychological barrier. It really wasn't a physical barrier. We could get on a surface street and get over there. But one week in a missions meeting, a member brought up the fact, well, there's this elementary school over there, and we have a lot of talent in our church, and many of us are retired educators. I wonder if there's something we could do that they need. Well, that's all it took was just to answer that question. And the next thing you know, for year after year after year, our church members are getting more and more involved in that school,
Mm.
which provided the gateway to be more and more involved in that community. It was an interesting door into the community is to go, first of all, to the school and begin to help there. So we had not just summertime emphasis in terms of helping a community, that eventually developed year round. We were always doing something in partnership with that school and with that community.
Mm,
And we like to think, well, look at all the good we're doing over there.
yes.
But I want you to know it did a lot of good over here where we were, because we were probably the greater beneficiaries than even the recipients of our attempts to be of some use in this world, if you know
Yes.
what I mean.
Yes.
But I think the main thing to consider is who are our neighbors in this community?
Yep.
How are they doing? Do we have something? Not necessarily money. Are we ourselves, just who we are and the experience that we've had, are we something they need? Is there a rationale for relationships outward to someone else?
Yep.
And discovering that was one of the greatest blessings to our congregation. And we hope we were to the school and the community we were in partnership with.
Yes. Asset based community development. We have assets to share generously, and others around us have assets as well, so that we all are benefiting one another. Uh, is a wonderful approach and a wonderful mindset to sharing. And as we are generous, we notice that within ourselves, we notice that within our church, but we also notice the generosity that's around us. And it's good for the church, it's good for the community, it's good for the people who receive, and it's good for the people who share. And too often, we put ourselves as the great hope up here, sharing to those that may be down here, when really it's hands washing each other and sharing in community development, uh, which is more, I think, uh, what God intended.
Yes, absolutely. And a generous church does get noticed.
Yes.
People talk about you, people brag on you,
Yep.
uh, people bring other opportunities to you, and sometimes people show up with resources that said, I want to be a part of this. And,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yep. So that moves us into September. And so, Ruben, uh, I am calling September. You want to guess what I'm calling September?
has it got a relationship word in it?
it is relationship month, Ruben. Maybe you missed relationships in July. Maybe you missed relationships in August. Uh, but relationships, I only have two sermons: love one another and laugh together. And those are relationships. Uh, when we come into September, several things are important within the relationships and the life of the church. The first thing you suggest is during September, we do some reporting on what's happened in June, July, and August. Why is that important?
Well, it's extremely important because, the initial pitch back in June was we got all this stuff planned for our youth and children, and we'll be investing more dollar wise and time wise and energy wise in their young lives during the summer than any other time during the year. So we would welcome your faithfulness in giving and serving during these summer months to give our youth a really saturated experience of the Christian life through all of their activities. When you make that kind of an appeal and you're that strong about it, those who respond deserve a report.
Yes,
They need to know if they've stepped up, what difference it made, how great a difference it made, because you're asking them to kind of get on the line with everybody and let's help heal and save some folk out there, even if it's ourselves.
yeah,
And I think it's important. to report back. What are the results of our plan for the youth and children during these past summer months? Here's how they responded, and what makes it so fine, and a lot of churches do that, is if the youth and children are giving the report themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you also suggest something fairly controversial in September. The average pastor in the average church in America preaches about stewardship, generosity, and money one sermon a year. So, in the average church in America, the average pastor is preaching once about money, generosity, stewardship, and whatever else is around that. But you are suggesting, Ruben Swint, the generosity guy, you are suggesting a sermon series on stewardship and generosity. Ruben, what are you telling us here?
Yeah, maybe I give fundraising in the church a bad name. I don't know. But here's the reality. Your folks have been in and out all summer. You know, they haven't been at every worship service you've held. They haven't heard every sermon you've preached. And so now their children or grandchildren are back in school. That kind of sets the tempo for the rest of the year. School started again. And I think they kind of need a reorientation, if you will. You know, let's refocus now. Who are we in Christ? What
Yeah,
does Christ ask us to do? How will we do that? And what are the repercussions or the results of living that kind of life? And that's when I think it's a perfect time to reorient to the fact that if we want a life that is truly life, as Scripture talks about, we will be involved in giving and serving others because that's the wisdom of all of those sacred scriptures. We serve ourselves best when we serve others. And as we serve others, if we believe Matthew 25, we're also serving the Christ.
yes.
So for me, it's entirely appropriate to start off your programmatic year with a series, 2 sermons, 3, 4, Give to Live. There's a book called Give to Live, and then there's Give to Live 2. The book's out of print. You can find it on eBay or other places used. Get it, read it. It is amazing how many studies have been done, both in terms of physical health, psychological health, overall well-being, that speaks to the therapeutic benefits of giving, of serving, of getting beyond your own world into the world of others. Almost sounds like another relationship month, Bo.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. Now, one question I have is this the stewardship emphasis? Is this for that we have in the fall? Is this going to be sort of the introduction to what's coming for the fall? What are you thinking about? How does that work in relationship to our fall stewardship?
Well, I don't have a linkage to fall stewardship with this suggestion.
Okay,
To me, it is basic stewardship education, generosity, devotion coming from the pulpit. And
okay,
it's a way to create the climate, if you will, in which a later stewardship emphasis may or may not be conducted. But giving is its own reward. And I would not say, preach this so that your budget will be strong. That's not what this is all about. I say, preach this so your people will be strong. They
okay.
will have an orientation to life that's biblical, that's therapeutic for them, and that serves others.
Right, right. And you know, one of the words we always get is your church only talks about money. Now, if the average pastor in the average church is only talking about money one time a year, we could hardly be justified in hearing that complaint. Uh, a sermon series about stewardship is also not about money, it's about
Right.
generosity.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. There is a big difference. Jesus does speak to money quite often in his messages, but the deeper meaning of those sermons from Jesus, and I think from us, should also be about how to be generous with our time, with our money, with our other resources. Uh, it's hard to argue against a call to generosity. I can understand preaching about money all the time. I once worked with a pastor who figured out how to make a special offering out of Easter Sunday, much to the
Yeah.
chagrin of everyone in the room but him. But being generous is totally different. And as our people begin to learn what we really mean by that, and no better place than the pulpit to set that example, uh, we are doing a great service to our people and in growing them in the disciples that God has called them to be.
Well, it's an attitude to life and a behavior towards others that will serve and benefit folk for all their lives and even their children. Uh, if you bring your children up observing that you and your spouse are generous people, not involved in a transaction, if you will,
Yes,
but just in a genuine desire to meet the needs of someone else. It's amazing how that catches, and they
absolutely.
do need to be taught it. But I think observing it in action is the best teacher.
Yes. Taught and caught, if you will.
Yeah.
And so while the pastor is preaching about generosity, we also do need to be looking towards that fall stewardship emphasis. How are we going to pledge the budget, if you will? What are we going to do about putting all of those resources together in what makes up our budget and what makes up all of our offerings and receipts and expectations? So,
Right.
what are we looking at there?
Well, I think the best stewardship programs that you could have, or emphasis, if you will. Number one, centers on people involvement. You get a lot of people involved. Number two, talks about the giving behavior that serves each person well, uh, regular giving, uh, giving that is cheerfully distributed, if you will, from our bank accounts, uh, and giving that has an eternal purpose, if you will. And so for me, I eschew, don't like to use the words budget. I don't like to use the word pledge. I think I've shared on one of our other videos that I worked with a church over a 4 year period of time trying to get them to shift their culture from pledging the budget. They actually had in their bylaws a pledge the budget committee. That was their orientation.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was the title of the committee. And notwithstanding that, they were good folks and they were generous, but we were trying to shift the culture to a more youthful approach, a more modern approach, if you will.
Yep.
And one of my last meetings with the stewardship team, we talked about all our language shifts we had been making, and we were going to give, for different motivations towards different goals. And the pastor led the closing prayer, and it says, "And Lord, just give us a mighty response so we can pledge this budget one more time." And then he had to rush off to another meeting, and I'm left with the aftermath, you know, and they're looking at me, and I says, "Well, I guess you're going to be bilingual for a while."
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, gosh. Well, we will have more to talk about pledging the budget when we get into our next video for October, November, December. Lots to do during that final quarter of the year, and more to come, more stories to come around that. Uh, as we close up, July, August, September, uh, as we have said a couple of times, are about relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships with our community, relationships within our church, and perhaps relationships within our own selves as we think about how we are responding generously to the call of God on our lives. If you would like a copy of our handout, just email me, bo.prosser at gmail.com. Please contact Ruben Swint at gmail.com. We are available to you and would love to have further conversation with you about how we can help you in this process. Quarter three, perhaps the more ignored quarter of our
Yes.
year round stewardship emphasis. Would you say that to be true, Ruben?
It is, and I think, a lot of church life kind of goes through a little decline, if you will, in terms of emphasis during the summer months. But school gets back in session, we regroup, we refocus, we march forth. And that's what this quarter is designed to help you get ready for.
Absolutely. So we've given you some ways, some practical things you can be doing, even in the midst of the summer slump, uh, to keep generosity and stewardship in front of your people, to keep them engaged with the community, to keep them engaged within the congregation, and to keep them engaged with their own uh, personal devotion to what needs to happen within the life of the church. Ruben Swint, you are indeed the generosity guy. Thank you so much for the way you give generously of your time and your wisdom. It's just always a pleasure to spend time with you, my friend.
Enjoy doing this with you, Bo. Thanks for your support.
Thank you. We will be back towards the end of September to look forward to October, November, December, and we will certainly keep you abreast of that in the newsletter and in other communication through Facebook and through our website. Bo Prosser, the Center for Christian Education, c4ce.org, Bo and the Beard, and the Generosity Guy. Thanks so much for listening. Hey, till we see you again, keep on rocking.